Okay, people. So I am joined today by Michael Pierro to talk about his new film, Self Driver. Michael, thank you for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
No worries, man. How are you doing?
Oh, good. Just enjoying the sunny day here in Toronto. One of the first of the year.
It's been raining in London.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
Oh man, Self Driver, your feature directorial debut, right?
It is, yeah. It was yeah, a lot of fun to make, but
Hmm.
an adventure.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, what kind of led you to this, right? Why was the time right to make your feature directorial debut?
I guess the idea for the film was something that I'd had in my mind, in the back of my mind for a few years, or like, something that took place in the world that we're playing in. And I knew I wanted to talk about labor and sort of the obsolescence of human labor and the idea of being replaced by machines, and also the gig economy and the way, like, I guess corporate interests are making it harder to earn a living and making work less stable for people,
Mm.
but find a way to package that in something that's entertaining and thrilling and more than just sort of me talking nonsense, something that people actually wanted to see. And so it took me some time to get those ideas on paper and connect the two together. But once I had a first draft of the script, I felt pretty confident we had a movie that we could make for the budget that we had available to us, which is almost
Ah,
nothing.
yeah. Budget is all there's always that constraint, right? With indie films, like
Yeah,
budget.
that's the main thing. And like, it's great to have these big ideas, but if you can't pull them off in a way that an audience is going to believe them, then it's sort of, you're not doing yourself any favors. So I went into
Mm,
this project knowing that we had a very limited budget, and so using our limitations as strengths was a big sort of operating, like, our MO was use our limitations as strengths. Try and, like, we if we stay in the car, it'll make things easier for us, but then that becomes part of the style of the film. And
yes.
yeah, so using stuff like that to enhance the style and building that into the style so that it feels like very intentional, but we can get away with a lot more because we're just
Mm.
using what's available to us.
Yeah, with that, like, thinking you want to tell this story, and then there's the constraints. You're like, okay, we'll keep our dude in the car more. How long then did it take to think of ways to keep it engaging, to switch that, the camera view, the perspective, and still be in the car?
Yeah, I think the once I knew where the movie was going, the goal was to sort of write little episodes to get us to that final scene. And I thought, like, as long as each scene was a little bit more tense and the stakes were a little bit higher than the previous scene, it would help the audience stay on board. And I think, like, once that sort of those puzzle pieces were in place, it felt like we had some room to play. And I guess the camera stuff was very limiting because we could only put it so many places, but we had these very tiny cameras, like, they were this big, and so we
Uh,
could hide them almost anywhere in the car, and
right.
that let us get some more interesting angles than had we shot it with a traditional movie camera.
Okay. Okay. Like, with like as I say, with indie films, right? It's all about getting that budget together.
Yeah.
So you've come up with this idea and you're trying to get it done. But then, a few other films have come out about ride sharing and stuff like that. Did that kind of give you pause at any point? Did you think, that like, can I still tell this story?
Yeah, for sure. I think when I wrote it and, like, sort of as we were shooting it, a bunch of the rideshare movies that are out now weren't out yet. They'd probably been like made, but they hadn't been
Mm.
released. And so as I was editing it, I saw all these films start to get released, and I was a little bit worried about, yeah, being just another drop in the bucket, being too late to the thing that people are talking about. But I think our movie is, we have a different take on it, and we've got, I think, a very interesting angle into the world. So it's not, I don't think it's, we're not borrowing or stealing or repeating anything that these other movies have. They all have their own angle
Yeah.
and way into the thing. And yeah, I think ours stands out personally, but that's, for the audience
No,
to decide.
it's definitely different from
Yeah.
the other ones out there. So, yeah, I don't think anyone could be like, "Oh, god damn that Michael, he's taking ideas." You
Yeah,
know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, this stands on its own, so that's good.
Yeah, the goal is to make something that I hadn't seen before. And I think going forward, that's sort of a standing goal of mine, is to make things that I want to see that I've not seen on screen, and find new
Mm.
ways to tell stories that maybe the story has been told or people are talking about the subject matter, but find a new way to get people to think about it maybe.
I think that's the thing, right? Because, yeah, there's kind of only so many stories technically,
Yeah, they
but
say there's
it's
like 33 stories.
but it's like a lot of time it's the way they're told, from the perspective they're told, and you know, with a lot of things, people seem to tend to like to do a certain template. So
Mhm.
if you can find that new route into it, then you're golden, you know what I mean?
Totally. I think that's my goal, is to find a new route into ideas that people are talking about now, but find a new way for just my own entertainment too, to get in there and find something new about something that is already on people's minds.
Mm, yeah. What was the hardest thing about this script for you?
About the script itself, I guess the script honestly came together pretty quickly. Like, I think because the idea had been stewing for a few years, and every few months I'd come back to it and maybe write a few pages just to like keep it fresh. And then, so by the time I was ready to sit down and write it, I felt like the first draft just sort of fell out of me. And then it was a matter of honing and making sure the characters made sense. But I think the biggest challenge for us in the pre-production stage, at least, was finding the people to inhabit the roles that I'd written. Nathaniel, the lead, was a good friend, so we knew we could rely on him, and he's,
Right, right.
in 90% of the movie. But all these other people, I wanted like unique characters, people who brought a different energy to the screen that maybe we're not used to seeing. And so finding those people, especially with the budget where, you can't attract these big actors,
Mm,
finding people who are willing to do it for what we could pay was, yeah, that was a big challenge. But I feel really lucky with the people who came out, and the people who ended up giving us their time were all so dedicated, and it made shooting way easier once when you're working with people who buy into the process and are really excited by it, or as
yeah.
excited as I was, then everyone's on the same ship going in the same direction, and it feels a lot easier.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the cast does work. Like everything, everyone plays their role really well. You believe in these yeah, you definitely believe in the people, right?
Yeah.
Some are, when we get to bro and sis, and things get a little weird, a little
Yeah,
weird.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But but you still buy them. You
yeah,
still buy these people, which is great, you know.
yeah. Reese and Lauren, who play bro and sis, were just so much fun to work with. And I think, like, I had this vague idea of creating these characters whose relationship is ambiguous, but then they really they took that idea and ran with it, and came up with some really fun stuff that I never would have thought to put on the page. But it like heightens those characters and makes them even weirder and weirder, even darker than than I could have imagined.
Yeah, and our disheveled man was
Yeah.
another odd one.
Yeah. I honestly, like, ended up being a really strong actor, but I cast the second I saw his headshot when it came in, I knew right away that this was the guy. And then I was pleasantly surprised when he turned out to also be able to act, but I fell in love with that face immediately.
Were there any other kind of oh my god, my mind's gone blank for a second. Scenarios, let's say, any little story vignettes that you were thinking of putting in, but you didn't have time for or budget for.
There was like a couple other scenes. We shot one more scene at that like last that the sort of warehouse space.
Hmm.
And then before he signs on to the app, we had a scene where he got in a car accident and we shot that, but then it just sort of felt like it slowed down the movie right when it should be taking off. It was sort of right at the 20-minute mark when you want him to, you know what's coming, so you're just
Yeah.
anticipating that. And so I felt bad about cutting that scene because, again, the actor who played the guy that Nathaniel hit was such a good guy and a great actor, but the scene just didn't make sense. Or
Hmm.
it made sense, but not like it disrupted the flow
Yeah.
at a time when we didn't want that. So we made the hard decision to cut that. But then yeah, as I was writing it, I definitely had other scenarios, other like I think most of the things that I came up with were probably harder to shoot the way we were shooting this movie. So I like sort of turned towards the things that I knew we could pull off.
Mm. Okay. Now, with the story, right? Because as soon as we have Nick in the car,
Hmm.
you know, what I mean? You know what
You
Omi's
know what's
gonna
gonna
do,
yeah, yeah.
right? But it's like, how long is it gonna take him to get to that place?
Hmm.
So with that, like, did you have any was there thought about that duration of time, right? How long should it be? How quickly do we get him just to do the thing?
Yeah, I think that was definitely the biggest challenge, especially in post as we're editing the movie, how much time we can afford there. And when you start cutting things, what do we lose? And really wanted to like, it was important for me to paint a picture of this guy as someone who like didn't have much to lose or desperately needed the money. And I felt like if we started pulling stuff out of that first 20 minutes, then it starts to get harder to sort of buy into his journey and root for him when he starts doing these worse and worse things because we don't if we don't fully understand what's at stake for him and why he needs this money, then when we see him do these bad things for the money, my worry was the audience wouldn't be as on board with it.
Yeah. No,
So there's
I
like a
think
balance, and I
mm,
think, yeah, if I was to write the script again, I would find maybe more efficient ways to get that 20 minutes out and which would leave us a bit more room in the later couple acts, but the tricky balance.
yeah. I mean, it's just like what we see, you understand the frustration,
Yeah.
right? You like dealing with all of those people, the complaints, the just the demands of it all.
Yeah.
Like you definitely feel that. You know what I mean? I don't think he makes it easy for himself,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Yeah, it's hard to root for him at times because you're just like, yo, you do not listen, right? You do not listen. What
yeah.
is wrong with and you kind of feel if you're doing that job, there's just certain things you have in your car, right?
Yeah.
And certain things you do for you, like you don't have trash all over the car, right? You
Yeah.
want to make it a nice experience. So, and you would figure people are gonna have accidents. So let me have some cleaning supplies ready. Let me
Yeah.
have, some bags so people
Totally.
can, you know what I mean? Just all of those things. But he just there's no fault. There's no fault.
Yeah. I think The goal is to make him feel, like, sort of hapless. He doesn't really have a plan. He's just sort of
Mm.
going taking things as they come and, like, not really trying that hard or not knowing how to get out of the circumstance in a good way. And so he just takes what comes at him and does what he can with what he's presented with.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely there, and we see the conflict he has at times,
Yeah.
like with the, with the angel, and at the end before the end, right
Yeah.
before, um, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
like we definitely kind of see him in two minds on what to do in the situations.
yeah, I think the goal was to like, he's not a bad person. He just doesn't have, like, a strong moral compass, or I think he's in a position where he's been sort of compromised, I guess, and his moral compass, he doesn't have the luxury of a moral compass when it comes to needing to feed his family and keep a roof over their head. He his choice is, like, either keep the lights on or do the right thing, and in those circumstances, I think it's harder to do the right thing.
Like he kind of came across as that person who, as you say, is an okay guy,
Yeah,
but doesn't always think about the end goal or the journey to that thing. Like, what I mean? He kind of wants a family, but didn't probably think about what's everything involved in that.
totally.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and so then when you get the call and it's just like, I need a break. I'm looking after the kid. And he's like, I need a break too. And it's just kind of like, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, but it's a little different right there, son. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that was my favorite moment. That so the woman on the phone with him is Nathaniel's actual wife, and so I got
Oh,
them to just sort of improvise around the scene. We had written a scene, but I think that was a line that he just sort of improvised, and it I think it really nailed the character on the head.
yeah.
It
Oh,
defined him
for
so
sure.
perfectly, you know?
Yeah, little tone deaf.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. But I
Oh
think that's
man.
my favorite type of character are these flawed characters that you can see yourself in a little bit, and it's frustrating to watch them sometimes, but that makes it more interesting because there's layers there and they're not perfect. And when I'm just sort of watching movies and reading books, those are my favorite characters to go on a journey with.
Oh, well, I mean, we know they exist. We know they're real.
Yeah,
Right? That's the thing. It's like at times when you have that character who doesn't do anything wrong, right? And is just like, "Ah, I'm here to do good, and you shouldn't say that. Don't curse." And blah, blah. You're just
yeah,
like, I mean, I don't know if I've met that person,
yeah,
right? Like everyone's flawed, and because we see it, even the people who try and profess to be that person, mad skeletons in the cupboard. I mean,
yeah,
look at Bill Cosby,
yeah,
right? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Take your vitamins. And I forget who it was, but I remember he had a go at an actor for cursing.
right.
Or it might have been a singer or a rapper, but
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
he
yeah,
came
yeah,
out all like, "You shouldn't do this. You should be ashamed of yourself." Blah, blah, blah. And all the time, you know what I
yeah.
mean? He's slipping roofies into people's
I
drinks.
know, that's a yeah, what a yeah, crazy, crazy thing.
Yeah. So
But
it's
that's
just like, you know what I mean? The people are flawed.
yeah,
So when we see a character like this, it's more believable because you're like, yeah, I know I've worked with that person, right?
yeah,
I've had conversations with that person. And sometimes you can see a little bit of yourself in them, or you understand how you get to that place. You
totally.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
So yeah, that's what I enjoy those things because I think it keeps you in the film, right? When you see those films and people are acting in this like all self-righteous way, or they're just really, I'm bad, 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 and you're just like, I mean, no one's really like that.
Yeah.
And so you kind of, sometimes you can get thrown out of something, because it's just not believable. So yeah, no, I think you did nail this character.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when you're writing these kind of people, do you think about like interactions you've had, people you know?
I mean, I try and think about when I'm writing a character. I guess that's a good question. How did the
I mean, you can say it's based on your brother. It's okay, Michael. We
No,
won't
no,
care.
I think there's a lot of it based on me, at least like my internal life. I try and like think of a something bad that someone might do, but then how would that person justify that to themselves?
Mm, mm.
And like everyone thinks that they're a good person at heart. No, very few people understand themselves to be the bad guy. They want to think of themselves as the good guy. And so then how do you justify your actions to yourself if you are doing something that is amoral or is like mean or is rude? We all sort of, not to the extent that we go to in the movie, but we all have darker sides and we have to justify that somehow to ourselves. And so starting from that place, I think, is interesting. And that's how this character came about, at least.
Mm, mm. Well, I think you've got that bit, right? When the with when we're following the angel character, and he's looking in the mirror,
Yeah.
and you're just like, yo, what's wrong with you, man? You know what I mean? What are you doing?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
That's
I think those kind of like that first conversation with his wife, and then that kind of scene really does kind of give you a good benchmark on who this is.
yeah. Yeah. And I love finding the little subtle things like that. So you don't have to hear him tell you. You just
Yeah.
show him by like, show him looking in the mirror when he's not supposed to. Show him doing these things that, you know, that that's not something that he's supposed to be doing. And so you get a little hint of what's going on under the surface of this guy.
Mm. Yeah. Like the time it took him to sometimes accept a job, a task, or to do something, like you just started to feel uncomfortable, right? You're just
Yeah,
like, yo,
yeah.
just fucking do it. Just press the thing. It says drive, drive. Like, what is wrong with you? And you're just
Yeah.
like, oh man, come on.
Yeah. I mean, that was the most fun to build that tension. And I think I have a lot of fun. I enjoy that a lot when we're especially editing, trying find ways to amp up just through the subtle things and little sound effects to make an audience feel as on edge as he would in that car.
Mm,
And so finding those little
yeah.
subtle things, like when we found figured out the sound effects for the app, I was really happy because they're grating, but they're also stress inducing.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Oh man, like with the apps that he's using, right? How much time kind of went into all of that, right? The name, the branding, just the thought of what would these be like?
it took a while. That I'd say in pre-production, I built those apps myself, and that
Oh,
was
so they were actually
yeah, because I knew we didn't have the money to do like computer animation, like comp it in
mm,
afterward. So I knew we'd have to figure out a way to do it live, like on camera.
uh,
And so there's this software that like app developers use to prototype their apps. So you can like
yeah.
put the design in and then make it interactive and sort of so you can show off your product before you go to the trouble of actually making it.
Mm,
And so I taught myself how to use this software and designed the two apps so that he could very easily, like rudimentarily touch buttons and they would do something. And it's the most basic version of what that app building software could do. But I spent a lot of time just figuring out how to make it work and designing it. And it was a lot of fun to come up with these two conflicting designs, but it was, yeah, it took me longer than I should have spent on it probably. But
Yo,
they're like feature so strongly, especially Tonomo.
mm,
It's on camera, like there's probably 5 or 6 minutes of just shots of the app on the phone, and so I wanted to make it feel good.
oh no, I mean, that's impressive. That because it's just like, yeah, I think there was another film that yeah, I covered, and had a similar conversation, and I think they added that in editing.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So to actually teach yourself how to develop your own thing and to get it to actually function for what we see. You know what I mean? That's I think that's definitely something that people can take on board, right? Because
yeah,
people say, "Oh, film director, that's really cool. I'd love to do that." Right? Actor, I'd love to do that. I mean, I people go, "Oh, I'd I'd love to do a podcast."
yeah,
And be like, "Okay, like, what's your idea?" I
yeah,
mean, "Oh, I don't, yeah, I'm not sure yet." I'm like, "Well, you're not gonna do one yet,
yeah, yeah,
right?" Or like, "Oh, so have you found some universities to go and take, directing classes, or are you like looking to volunteer to get the?" And they're like, "No." I mean, well, you're not doing the thing then,
yeah,
right? So people oftentimes they say they want to do something, but then have no gumption to actually do it, right? And so to go, I want to make a film, right? I want to do these things, but then have no fault to actually getting it done, right? I feel we see that all the time. So when you're like, oh, this is what I want to do, I'm going to teach myself those things and I'm going to make it work, right? I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people need to hear, because it's just like this is the realities of storytelling, of filmmaking, and especially in the indie world. You know what I mean?
totally. Yeah, no one's gonna give you permission to make a movie, you know? I think you just have
Mhm.
to take it. That's at least at this stage, like, for first-time filmmakers, it's really hard to get anyone to, give you the time of day. They wanna know that you have a track record, they wanna know that you can do it and you've done it before. And so if you're really passionate about it, you have to just, you know, go out there and find a way to make it happen for yourself. And I think it's hard because the resources, even now, the like resources are way more accessible than they were ever before.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot of work, and you still need to build a team, and you still need to, even like in this movie, I did 90% of the jobs on set
Mm.
outside of acting, but we still had an incredible team that we had to build to get the thing over the finish line. And that's like, it's an uphill battle sometimes.
Yeah, I definitely noticed you wore a lot of hats
Yeah. Yeah.
with this film, man.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you wrote it, you directed it, you produce, you edit. Like, how was that for you? You know what I mean? But having, to manage all of those aspects.
I think the hard part is not having collaborators in those roles. Like, I love working with people, and so when we're on set working with actors, that's a lot of fun, and you get to sort of bounce ideas off people, and so those stages I think are really valuable. And but when you wear the hats that I was wearing, you have fewer collaborators, fewer people to bounce ideas off of, and so
Mm,
especially in post when I'm editing by myself, you don't have someone to like be the second filter to tell you if your ideas are really good, are working, or if it feels
yeah,
right. And so I definitely missed that. I missed having those people just to help carry the burden. But
yeah,
then, you find friends and people to show the movie to and get their feedback. And I was pretty open with who I showed the film to as we were editing it, just to get as many voices saying what felt good and what didn't quite work, and digest that to do the next version.
mm. Now with that, right? And also, I think it plays into when you're on the festival circuit, right? And you're playing it and that reaction from audiences and things like that. Like,
Yeah,
how do you balance criticism and feedback, right? Because there are things that people love, things that people don't love, right? Everyone's got that different taste.
totally.
So if I said to you, Michael, I thought it was a really good film. I I don't think our character needs glasses though. Like, I think we should change that, and
Yeah.
I think we need to give him hair. Give him some big fluffy hair. I think
Yeah.
that people will gravitate to him more if you do those things. You know what I mean? I could say that to you, and that's going against the vision you have, right? It's going against a vision, and who says I'm right? You
Yeah,
know what
no,
I mean? So to kind of take someone's opinions, but still not lose sight on your actual vision.
and it's tough for sure. I think the main thing is knowing what you wanted to make, and if the feedback is sort of about that and is telling you that that is existing, and like someone might not like the thing you're trying to make, but that's okay as long as the thing that you were trying to do is clear. In my mind, that's a success. And yeah, you can't please everyone. Everyone's going to have an opinion, and I think that's the like it's the hard part, but also the beauty of making art is you get to provoke a reaction in all sorts of people. And the more people who see this film, the better. And so
Mm.
I'm if someone who wouldn't normally see this movie or wouldn't normally like this type of movie ends up seeing it, and even if they don't love it, I think I'm just glad that it got a chance and another person got to see something I put on screen. And also it sort of provokes a conversation. I think if people don't have the same opinions on a film, that's better because you get to walk out of the screening talking about it. If everyone loved it and it's amazing, then the conversations are less interesting than if people have differing opinions on what they just saw.
I think it's the conversation that is always so interesting after you've watched something,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I think that's why I love this, right? Being able to have conversations with the creators behind something.
Totally.
Because you can watch something and feel like, oh man, I think, yeah, were they trying to say this? Right with that, and what went into doing that scene, and so you get to then be like, oh, so what was, and you're like, oh, okay, and sometimes you might be like, oh, that's what I thought, and other times you're like, I don't even see that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was unexpected, so it's always really interesting. And just the other day I went to see Sinners. Yeah, I went
Oh,
to a
yeah.
advanced screening of Sinners.
Nice.
um and I took one of my peoples along, and we both loved the film. But even though you both enjoyed the film, there's still different takes on it, right? We still having these discussions
Yeah.
about, what did the music mean,
Right.
right? And the scene where this happens, like, what did, because I thought that, and you're like, no, 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 what they're doing is talking about this. And so you can have those conversations, and especially, sometimes you don't like something and someone drops some knowledge on it, and you're like, huh,
Yeah.
okay,
That's
that
my
changes
favorite,
it.
yeah, when someone gives you a new perspective that you didn't and it changes what you just saw in your own head.
Mm,
That's the most exciting thing about watching a film with people, going in there, having your experience, and then having it altered afterwards by everyone else's opinions, and
yeah, no, yeah, that's always yeah, that's always great.
yeah,
It is the drawback of going to press screenings, you know what I
right.
mean? Because you don't always get the opportunity to have those discussions afterwards. A
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
times
yeah.
people just jet.
Right.
People jet. People are just like, it's always a little bit stush, you know what I mean? People
Right.
don't, it's just like a little uptight and just like, oh.
Yeah, 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 that's funny.
Now, with this film, right? So this being your feature directorial debut, there's a bit of a gap, right? From Waking, your last
Mhm.
short film,
Yeah.
which you made in 2011, and then, so that's what, 13 years.
Yeah. A long time.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, you can see you're still, doing a lot of editing work, right? You're working on big shows, working mums, and all different things like that.
Yeah.
So, was it literally, the constraints of everyday life that got in the way of filmmaking, or did you feel you needed a break? Like, what was
No,
that
it was
like?
definitely the constraints of everyday life, you know, I think I get yeah, you know, as my career as an editor started to take off and I got more and more busy, and then just the time it takes to sit down and develop an idea and write it, and it felt less and less important at times. And
Mm,
then all of a sudden, yeah, a decade goes by, and I'm thinking, I don't want to just not ever make a film. Like I went into the industry and I went to film school wanting to write and direct and tell stories, and I'd sort of let that fall to the wayside. So I think, yeah, when I realized that I needed to sort of get back on the horse, that's when I started to take this idea seriously, because I knew it was something that we could pull off fairly quickly and without waiting around. And I think one of my sort of weaknesses as a filmmaker is impatience. The
mm,
idea of waiting for someone to give you permission, waiting for funding, waiting, like, it makes it hard for me to get excited about an idea. And so this one, I knew we could just do. We didn't have to wait for anyone. And I had the luxury of having a pretty decent paying job coming up in a few months. So I had a couple, like 6 months off, and then a pretty big paycheck coming my
yeah,
way. So it
yeah.
made it easier for me to say, okay, I'll spend some money making this. I'll take the time to, you know, commit to the project, and then I can pay my debts later.
Yes, no, that's definitely a help,
Yeah.
right? There's
No, it's a
definitely a
huge
big help
yeah.
knowing that. Mm. But you're working as an editor, you're getting more and more acclaim. You know what I mean? People have been like, Michael, can you edit my thing? Michael, you know what I mean? You're
Yeah.
getting recommendations, you're getting this. Were you ever at a point where you're like, actually, I could probably be bigger as an editor than anything else. Let me just run with this.
Yeah, I think that probably did happen to some degree also. And then, you know, I had a family, a kid, so it made editing is a pretty easy job compared to the other jobs on set. You can make your own hours, and the hours are a lot more manageable. So
Mm,
when we had our daughter, it was easier to just stick in that lane. But I think I never yeah, I think when I realized how long it had been since I had been making my short films, it was hard to I felt pretty depressed. I was like, "No, I can't just let that dream die." And
yeah,
I enjoy editing, and it's one of my favorite parts of the process, but the thing the dream that I had was to make movies, and so I wanted to make sure I didn't give up on that before it was too late.
right, right. Now, with that gap, right? And then the thought of actually, I need to tell stories. I
Yeah.
need to do my own thing still. Was there a thought of, it's been a while, let me make another short to kind of just knock the dust off and then do the feature?
I guess, like I said, I'm too impatient. I didn't wanna wait, and I knew, like, this movie I think I had such a strong idea of how we would pull it off, and how the camera would work, and how the actors would operate in the car, and so it felt manageable, and it just felt like a very long short film. Our crew was very small. It wasn't like I was managing a whole, 30 people every single day. The crew was the crew that I had when I was making those short films, very, very intimate, very, like, nimble and small, and
Right.
so it didn't feel like I was biting off more than I could chew at that stage.
Okay.
But then also, yeah, I just didn't want I sort of felt like I'd made those short films and I want to try something bigger.
I mean, it does make sense, right? Because essentially, you know how to do it,
Yeah.
right? So, how much more do you need to practice before you just go do it?
That was my feeling, and, like, I definitely made some mistakes and learned some things as we went along, but it's nothing that you know, making another short film wouldn't have taught me those lessons. I needed to make
Yeah.
something longer to learn the stuff that I learned making this.
Well, yeah, because it's, you know, a short film is, you're still doing those things, right? You're writing, you're directing, producing, editing. You know what I mean? You're doing those things,
Yeah.
but it's still different, right? The level in which you are doing it as is different. Like my day job is communications, right? And for ages, I was working, at senior level, like senior officer level.
Mhm.
And you're working under people and you're just like, and you're seeing how they're operating, and you're thinking, I could do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're just like, you know what? I don't think they're managing things that well, right? I don't think they're communicating with the team that well. If I was doing it, I would do it in this way. So you can have the full, right? And sometimes you're deputizing for your manager,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you're doing everything without the title, you know what I mean?
Totally.
But it's not until you actually get into the role that you completely understand what it is, right? And it wasn't until my now friend gave me the opportunity, right? Because you're thinking, I can do this. Yeah, I could definitely do this. But then when you're doing it, that's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
So you can make mistakes, but you don't know if you know what I mean, until you're actually in the seat.
Totally. I feel like I had a similar experience just working as an editor, working with all these other directors, and sometimes they'd come in and you'd be like, "Oh, I could have I know I see the mistakes you made. I know that I could have done this better. I know just from watching all these other directors work, I know there was a better way to do this
Mm,
scene, or like a different angle on the scene, or a different way to work with these actors." And so I feel like I've had a lot of those experiences sitting in the editing room with people, watching them work, knowing that like you're capable of it, and then
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, it turns out you were right. Like you did your thing, man. You definitely did your thing. It is, I think, Self Driver is definitely an enjoyable film, right? I think you definitely feel what the dude's going through, why he's doing some of the things. You have that, anxiety, that
Yeah.
frustration, and it's just like, do it or don't do it. Like, do this thing. Like, what are you talking about? And you'll just be like, obviously, read the terms.
Yeah,
Read the
totally.
terms.
Read the terms, man.
You know what I mean? Like, if someone tells you, it's just that you don't have to read those, you
Yeah.
definitely have to read those.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Uh, so I think, yeah, the film works, and there's a lot of films that you can watch, and it doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah, no, yeah, there are. It's hard to know. I think because of my experience as an editor, I've seen that like the journey a script takes, and the pitfalls of turning a script into something that you shoot, and then turning the material that you shoot into a movie through the editing process. There's mistakes in like timing and performance and in pacing, and so I think just watching other people learn from their mistakes helped me learn those things, and
Mm.
so I had that experience without having to have the experience.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that also helped with that, what I mean, confidence that you can make the film? Because, what I mean, you're an editor. right? So you know how to, what I mean, iron over those little things, right? To fill those gaps, to, you know, bring a story to where it needs to be.
Totally. And I think just sort of knowing how it would work in the edit, and so I knowing when, if like the whole scene, I didn't get the whole scene in one take, I knew that there are pieces here in this take, and then I got other pieces there, and then knowing that, okay, I need the one piece we didn't quite get is in the middle, so let's just go back and reshoot this, like a pickup of this one beat, so that I had all the pieces that the scene needed, and knowing how it was going to cut together in my head, having an idea of the way a scene would be structured before we went into the shoot. That was all stuff I learned as an editor, but it really
Mm.
helped me as a director and a writer. Just knowing how long a scene should feel on the page before we shoot it helped a lot, because sometimes you have all these ideas and you want to write them down, but like you can't have a 10-page scene of, unless you're Quentin Tarantino, a 10-page dialogue scene is not like what an audience wants to see.
Yeah, that needs to be some great dialogue
Yeah,
for
exactly.
that to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Oh man. Um, with, the locations, right? We've got, our guy driving around. How long did it take to kind of think about, okay, we can we'll be able to film in these places, right? These places aren't crazy busy, or what I mean, it's going to be, it's more viable if we go this route rather than down this busier street.
Yeah.
Like, how long did that kind of take to map out?
It took, yeah, I guess we did before we shot. Me and Kirei, my co-producer, drove around the city. We spent a couple nights just scoping out the general neighborhoods and seeing, like, planning a path and seeing where we could pull over to either shoot the scene or to just like reset and then have a home base somewhere downtown, have, or somewhere in the like industrial areas. And then we
Mm,
figured out a few different paths, and yeah, it took a while, but then we would also just, once we were in the car, sometimes we would just let Nathaniel drive, and as long as the background, we stay in a general zone so that the backgrounds felt consistent, and we would just draw sort of loop-de-loops around the neighborhood as we ran the scene 4 or 5 times, and then pull over, move the cameras, and do the same thing.
I think sometimes with films, where, if they're set in a big city, they like to hit certain landmarks,
Yeah.
right? They like to hit and show these certain things. But then if you're from that city, you're like, wait, if they're here, how would they go past that like,
Yeah,
what was that journey? That's
yeah.
does make no sense whatsoever. Like, were you thinking about that as you're doing it, to kind of like this, it has to make sense in a way.
A little bit, although there is, if like someone is really familiar with the geography of Toronto, they would call me out on a few of those things. But we tried to make it make sense. So when, for if there's one scene, we would make sure that we were on one consistent path. And then sometimes we would loop around and go the other way, the opposite direction on the same road.
Right.
But there you could see there's a few shots where you see like a storefront go by his window in one direction, and then a few shots later we'd see it out of his passenger's window going in the opposite direction. And
Yeah.
I mean, if eagle-eyed Toronto film lovers will spot that from a mile away, but the rest of the world hopefully doesn't quite pick up on it.
Hey, well, it's been a minute since I've been to Toronto. So yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't think, and I don't drive, so I was walking around
yeah, yeah,
rather than driving. So yeah, you had me fooled.
yeah. Good.
Oh man. They when you got to the edit, were there any major things that you're like, how do I fix that? Right? How do I bring people to where I need to bring them.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it was a long process. I think I knew the tone that I had in my head, but finding ways to like keep things funny when they needed to be funny and then turn that funniness into tension that was a learning curve. And then there was one scene that we actually had to reshoot just because on the day it didn't no, it was sort of the last thing we shot one night and everyone was too tired and no one was firing on all cylinders. So we went out a couple months later and reshot one scene. But for the most part, it was just, yeah, slowly chipping away at it and then showing it to people and getting feedback and seeing what was landing and what wasn't, and then going back and honing it some more. Sometimes it feels like sculpture. You chip away at something, and like the more you chip away at it, the more detailed the shape gets, and
Mm.
people start to respond to the same things more and more. And that's when you start hearing the same things back, that's when you know you're starting to get on the right page.
Right, right. Was the ending always what we see it as, or did you kind of play around with that a bit?
The sort of the climax of the film was always that from the first draft. When I came up with that ideas, that when I realized I had something and I had an idea that I could latch onto and was excited about. And so in the edit, that was always the thing. And finding a way to set that up and sort of develop the car into a character throughout the film was a challenge in the edit. We wanted we didn't want to overuse it, but we wanted to see him talk to the car and we wanted to see him
Mm.
have a relationship with this sort of inanimate object, and finding ways to pepper that in and develop it in a way that felt natural, that wasn't too like ham-fisted, I guess, was a challenge.
Yeah. Well, I think it's after oh god, it's the I'm assuming it's Christian Aldo's character.
Yeah.
I think after he's in the car and what he leaves
Yeah.
for him in the car,
Yeah.
right? When we get to that, like a lot of that, conversation in a monologue kind of stuff, that all because like you know what I mean? Because you buy it because of the state
Mhm.
we're in right now. You know what I
Totally.
mean?
Yeah.
I thought that, and so then with that envy, you're kind of wondering how much of that is that as well. You know what I mean?
That was the goal, is to I like an ambiguous ending, and I like the idea of something that could be interpreted multiple ways, and I think it's sort of 50-50 what people believe coming out of it. Some think it was all one thing, some people think it was all the other, and, that makes me happy. I think that's the goal, was to make something that inspired a bit of controversy.
Mm. Well, as I say, if it wasn't for the jumper, you might think that, you know what I mean, maybe like,
Yeah,
you know, you know what I mean? So yeah, but I thought it was and the visuals. I mean, as everything then becomes um more fluid,
yeah,
right? And you change the tone, the music, and we get a little bit softer on the focus. You know, I liked all of that because oftentimes when people are showing someone drunk or intoxicated, it's always a bit frustrating, right? Because they always have a like,
yeah,
Michael,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
hey, what's that? And you're just like, no one does that. Like, what are
yeah,
we doing? That's not drunk. That's not intoxicated. That's just dumb,
yeah.
right? So it gets a little frustrating. So I thought the visuals that we get here really do help sell the situation well.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's one of my pet peeves too, is when someone's trying to play drunk. And I think the thing about being drunk is you're always trying to pretend you're not when you're
Yes.
interacting with someone. And so from an outside, you're like, it's someone is trying really hard to hold it in. And I think Nathaniel went into that part of the film with that idea in mind of he didn't want to let on how messed up he was. And so trying extra hard and being like sort of almost over the top of how sober he was pretending to be is,
Mm.
I think,
Well, it's like looking too long, right?
yeah.
It's those
Yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah.
things that, what I mean, that's what you would do. Like, what I think
Totally.
one of my favorite, probably drunk sequences has to be in Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
Right, when DiCaprio is like, "Yeah, and I was fat," and we see him drive home,
Yeah.
and then he comes out and looks at the car, and it's
And it's all messed up.
huh, and then they show how he really drove
Yeah.
home, and you're like, "Oh my god."
Yeah. Incredible.
Oh, man, yeah, that was great. That was great. That was some good storytelling right there.
For sure.
Mm. Now, with all the cast and everything, how did you kind of find yourself communicating with them? How did you try get them to, get into these characters? Or did you kind of let them find their own way there?
Well, we did a little bit of rehearsal just to get everyone on the same page and like, but I am a big fan of letting actors find it themselves. And once you once everyone understands the goal of the character and what they want and what the reason they exist in the movie in the first place is, if you've cast them right and they have the right energy for the role that you sort of see, then I think it's best to just trust them and let them go. And I would tell them to go far, and then if it was too far, we'd bring them back. And then in editing, I would play with the levels. If they have, yeah, I was excited to let them go, and I would push them to get bigger and bigger, and then we would pull it back and find in editing which one for which scene, take of the which take on the material worked best for each scene. And you know but I think they would come
Mm.
up with ideas that I could never have come up with on my own, that were never in the script, that really amped things up and made these characters feel alive. And that's, you know for me, that's the most exciting part.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, no, I think when a cast is completely dialed into a project, it it really tells.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because I don't think there's anyone who you, when watching this, you go, they didn't really give their A game here. You know what I mean?
No, we got so
Everyone really
lucky.
does
Yeah.
deliver.
Yeah, I feel really lucky that everyone from the smallest role to the biggest was on board, and they came to have fun, and we found ways to have fun, and we found ways to make each character interesting. And I think that made it good for them, as I was inviting them to contribute in much as uh, much as they wanted. So that kept the vibe good on set, and people were excited to just play.
Mm. No, yeah, it definitely shows in the end product, man. Like you're dropping soon, right? I think the 8th of May,
Yeah.
right? So how's that feel, right? How's the emotions like knowing that soon it's gonna be completely out to the world?
It feels great. It was a bit of an uphill battle because we made this for nothing and there weren't, movie stars. It was an uphill battle getting people to pay attention, but every festival screening we did, we got a little bit more attention, and then we met some great cheerleaders who, loved the film and helped us meet other people, and sort of slowly building the team. And so now that the world outside of this festival circuit's going to get to see it is a real thrill. And so we obviously wanted this, but it was something that I didn't really even think would, or I wasn't thinking this far ahead when I made it. I wanted it I wanted to say I made a movie, and I wanted some people to see it, and the fact that now the world is going to get to see it is feels like a bonus,
Mm, yeah. Have you thought about what comes next?
I'm writing some stuff now. We're hoping to shoot something maybe in the fall with some people from the same team and building our team, hopefully with a bit more money than last time, but still a very indie project.
Okay. W- what genre would this next story be
I
in?
guess without saying too much, it's a similar world. It's talking about similar themes, I think.
Okay.
Uh, a little bit more magic realism, but also a very dark thriller, a very uh, hopefully dark comedy as well, but not just in a car. We get to walk around.
Uh-huh.
I'm
Okay, that's cool.
I'm
Like,
excited
is
to be able to walk around.
so would it be set in Toronto too?
I guess as much as Self-Driver is, I mean, I don't think Self-Driver is not intentionally explicitly Toronto. It's sort of an
Mm,
anonymous city, and I think this would be as well, but I'm not trying to pretend it's not Toronto at the same time.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
Toronto
yeah,
has an interesting there's so many different areas of the city, a lot of urban sprawl and a lot of industrial areas, and then obviously the downtown, and I
yeah.
like that journey that we did in Self-Driver, and so getting similar landscapes is something I'm hoping to do.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing it, man, after this one for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
hopefully keep an eye out a year or 2 from now.
Are there any particular genres that you really want to dip your toe in at some point? Or, you know?
I guess I'm excited by sort of all the genres of film, and as a film watcher and a film lover, I don't discriminate. And so you know, I think this world, the sort of thriller adjacent, it's kind of a thriller, but it's also dark comedy, and it's not a traditional thriller, is what is exciting, and playing with the ideas of a genre, but then you know bending them to my will is
Yeah.
is uh is what excites me. So I think I would never make a straight genre film, but using elements from all these sort of different sources and using my own take for them.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like those kind of sort because I think, you know, there's comedy in so many different, situations,
Yeah,
right? Even when everything's going to hell, sometimes someone just cracks a joke, right? And you're
exactly.
laughing, and then it's back to being serious again. You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? I think you've always got a mishmash of
And I think it's
emotion.
important just to keep, it's not if everything is so dark and dour, it's hard to keep an audience on board for that long. You need those breaks just to let everyone take a breath.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I think there was some jokes in Uncut Gems, but you were
Yeah.
just like, "Oh."
Yeah, exactly. I think that's my favorite mix is where the jokes are there to just relieve the tension, but it's still ramping up and you get maybe 30 seconds or a minute of reprieve and then you're back in the hot seat.
Mm. Yeah, I have to say one of my favorite films is, and was it Paul Thomas Anderson, Punch Drunk Love?
Oh yeah. That-
Because, you know what I mean? You've got that romantic bit of the story, but then it's kind of a thriller, and you just
Yeah,
got all these different things going on, you know what I
totally.
mean, in the film, but it's just so damn well done.
Yeah, that's a huge one for me.
Yeah, no, yeah, I do need to watch that again at some point because I haven't seen it in ages, and it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. So, yeah, with Self Driver, right? What else kind of do you need to do before it's out in the world?
I guess now the main thing is just letting as many people know that it exists as possible and getting as many people excited to see it as we can. That's our main goal.
Mm.
Which is,
Well,
yeah, like I said, it's an uphill battle because we don't have the star power. We don't have the things that a traditional movie has. So getting the word out in this sort of grassroots way with like podcasts like this is so valuable because this is how I think we build a fan base from the ground up and not from the top down. So
mm.
it's a challenge, but it's really rewarding because I get to sort of meet more people and I get to talk to film lovers and connect on a personal basis. So
Yeah, and you know what? I think you can have all the stars you want in a film, but it's not gonna make it good.
totally.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so it's just kind of like sometimes if people hear an idea, right, and that sounds intriguing,
Yeah.
then that's enough to bring them to the table, as it were. You know what I mean? So I think like as soon as people hear about the film, or just even if a friend sees it and be like, yeah, no, it was great because it did it, that's gonna bring people to it.
Yeah. That's that's the goal. That like that grassroots movement is the way this movie is going to get out there.
Yeah, no, I think it will. And you know, once people hear, I think it's hearing people's passion for something as well.
Totally.
Right? When you hear someone talk about it and be so infused by the thing, you're like, you know what? Let me go and check that out. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
So
that's my as a like a film watcher, that's my favorite way to discover a movie is have a friend who I trust, someone I know whose taste somewhat aligns with mine, tell me
mm,
something that I've never heard of before, and then go discover this gem that I never ever would have had I just been like, taking what the studios have been feeding me.
yes. Oh, definitely. And I have to say, right? A lot of the big films that were supposed to be, you know what I mean, amazing,
Yeah,
haven't really delivered. And it's been indie films that have been the things that have been so impressive, really, for a lot of this year so far, you know? So, you know what I mean? I think it's people like yourself just putting a different spin on some stories, right? Bringing something fresh to the table. That's
totally.
that's the thing that gets people excited. So just keep doing what you're doing, Michael.
Thanks, man. I'm gonna try.
Well, how can people keep track of everything you're doing and you know, self-driver and all of that jazz?
I guess the best way is to follow me on Instagram and the movie on Instagram. Uh, we don't have like any other official sort of websites at the moment, but we'll keep posting about the movie there, and you can follow us for updates. So my Instagram is at m_Pierro, and that's probably the best place to get updates.
Okay, splendid. Well, people, all the links will be on the website.
Great.
So make sure that you go give Michael a follow, go check out Self Driver for sure. And yeah, just keep things posted because after this you can see that yeah, some big things are in store for Michael and the crew. So yeah, Michael, thank you for stopping by and talking all things self-driver. This
Thank
has
you
been
so
great.
much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and like I said, this is a grassroots movie, and I appreciate everyone who's willing to give us even a few minutes of time. So I really appreciate you get helping us get the word out.
Hey, no worries at all, man. Is you know what I mean? I think it doesn't necessarily matter what genre it is or anything like that. If the story is good,
Yeah,
that's all we care about, and this was a good story, man. So you did what we wanted,
thanks,
and
man.
you kept us entertained. So yeah, awesome job.
I appreciate it.
No worries, man. Well, come by when you have your next project ready to talk about for sure.
I absolutely will. Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Splendid, man.
Okay.
Thank you for the time, man.
Thank
You
you.
take it easy.
All right, you too.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.